Welcome back. All right. So we're going to talk about the Washington Capitals today in my series looking at teams that lost in the first round of the playoffs. And of course, once we get through the second round, then I use the board for teams that lost in the second round, all that fun stuff. But for right now, we're going to talk about the Caps. I think for this season to have been seen as a success, they needed to get out of the first round. And at the very least, and I don't think that was going to be enough either. Ovechkin's only got so many go-arounds left before his career is done. And the question becomes one of, okay, so is Washington right now a Stanley Cup contender? And I think what we saw in the first round is they can absolutely get ahead, but against Florida, and there's no shame in losing against Florida, but it had to hurt that they were ahead in the series and then they lost it. That they were controlling that transition game for Florida, and then suddenly they weren't, and we end up with a series where they lose 4-2 to the Panthers. They were 44, 26, and 12 during the regular season for exactly 100 points. In April, going into the playoffs, they were 7, 5, and 2. So their April record is okay. It's around average. You know, you've won half your games. It's not bad. And one thing I pointed out as we got towards the end of the season, teams in the East didn't seem to be concerned about the matchups. They were still resting guys. They were still playing it as if, well, we're in the playoffs, we're home and cooled. So it didn't feel like Washington was necessarily concerned with whether or not they played Florida or the New York Rangers. They had an opportunity to catch them past Pittsburgh. They didn't do it. And here we are. I don't know that they would have beaten the Rangers either. Recent history would tell you the Rangers would definitely be a handful for them. So their playoff scoring leaders, TJ Oshie, who had a very good first round, 6 goals and 1 assist for him. Backstrom, 2 goals and 4 assists. Ovechkin only had the 1 goal, so Florida's going to take that as a win to go with 5 assists for 6 points. Kuznetsov, 2 goals, 3 assists for him. And John Carlson, 1 goal, 4 assists. A very good core. It's an aging core, and it's a conversation to be had about whether or not next year we see Connor McMichael getting more ice time and a more prominent role with the team than what he had this year. Does Leeson get more of an opportunity next year than he got this year? Do we start seeing those kids being integrated a little more? Does Lapierre get a full season next year? But the other question, too, becomes one of, so the kids that are coming up, is that going to be enough to keep this team in contention, or are they going to be struggling, say, a year or two from now in order to both make the playoffs and be relevant should they get there? And so that's the big question, and I don't like to get into whose window is open or closed because you can look silly pretty darn quick. The Detroit Red Wings made a living of that in the late 90s, early 2000s, where I would see, well, their window's closed, they're too old now, and then they'd win another cup. So their goaltending in the playoffs is really, to me, one of the big question marks, and it's a question mark I had going into the playoffs. And I said the whole time I could not see Washington winning a round in the first round. And I couldn't see a matchup where I thought it favored Washington, and the goaltending was a big part of it. You're going against Bobrovsky. Bobrovsky is the better goaltender between himself and Samsonov, although Samsonov's numbers were good, and they were better than Bobrovsky's throughout that whole first round. Samsonov's 1-3 with a .912 save percentage. I think it's pretty clear he's the guy going forward, which leaves you wondering, so what do they do with Vanacek? Vanacek, a goal and an assist for, or goal and assist, 1-1 record. In that he didn't have, if he had a goal and an assist, that'd be something, wouldn't it? So he's 1-1 and an .863 save percentage. And coming off that second game, they went with Samsonov, and they never seemed to give much consideration to going back to Vanacek. So that tells me they've made their mind up. They're both restricted free agents this summer. So while neither goaltender would get a huge raise, it is possible that they sign Vanacek and then look for a deal. Because there was rumors at the deadline that they were in on Fleury as well. And then there was some discussion about whether or not Fleury would have been willing to go to the Washington Capitals and play against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Play for a team that he's met once or twice in the playoffs, right? So, during the regular season, Ovechkin's their leading scorer with 50 goals, 40 assists for 90 points. Kuznetsov, 24 goals, 54 assists, 78 points for him. With the amount of games that were missed by Backstrom, I think Kuznetsov's shown that once Backstrom's career is done, the Kuznetsov's going to take his spot on some level, although Kuznetsov, I think, is the better goal scorer between the two of them. Carlson, 17 goals, 54 assists, 71 points. Not a lot of attention paid to him in terms of Norris consideration, but he had a very good year. Tom Wilson, 24 goals, 28 assists, kind of came into his own. And really, compared to previous seasons, not nearly as many hits by Tom Wilson that made people angry and had a lot of fist shaking from hockey fans. Connor Sherry, 19 goals, 24 assists, 43 points. I think Sherry had a good year. That being said, do they need to make changes? Probably. But it's up to the GM to decide which changes are going to get them closer rather than further away from the Stanley Cup. Regular season goaltending is kind of a reverse when it comes to the save percentage, but if you look, you can see Samsonov, slightly better record at 23, 12, and 5, 896 save percentage. Vanacek, 20, 12, and 6 with a 908 save percentage. So, again, those numbers don't wow you. They don't jump off the page. But, I mean, for the Caps, that's their tandem right now. Obviously, they had other, I think Copley played one game and Fucali played as well. But that's not going to be an option for them as a backup going into next year. Again, if they fashion themselves as being a, Stanley Cup champion again, they were Stanley Cup champion 4 years ago, can they get back? And so that's a question that I think right now most people would say no, but again, we've been fooled before. Now, pending UFAs, well, it's quite the list here. You've got Johansson, or Johansson, depends on where he's playing, depends on his mood that day. But yeah, Johansson, I think he played well enough. I don't know if they keep him around. Larson, again, much the same. I think he played all right. But again, it's up to the GM to decide if he needs to upgrade or if they're okay and he wants to go back to them. Justin Schultz, you got Kempney, you got Irwin, so you got 3 defensemen right there. And I would not be surprised to see them move on from all 3. And then you got Phoenix Copley, who's been the number 3 goaltender, or is he the number 4? Either way, he's a UFA this summer, and they're a team that has $9 million approximately in cap space. And considering your RFAs are Samsonov, Vanacek, and Leeson, well, Leeson's going to get probably, league minimum somewhere around there. But Samsonov could get $2.5 million. Just using that as just an example. And so that would eat into the amount of cap space they have in the offseason. It does get tough from here. And again, you've got an aging core here. And I don't know that they can get back to being a Stanley Cup favorite or a really true contender, maybe to win the division kind of thing. But we'll see. So if we look over the last decade, 2013 they lost in the first round against the Rangers in 7. And Game 7's been a bit of a problem for the Washington Capitals. They didn't get to a Game 7 against Florida. I don't think that would have gone well either. 2014, they missed the playoffs, so they didn't have to worry about the Game 7 that year. It returns in 2015, where they lost in the second round against the Rangers, 4-3 in a series, not dissimilar to the one that the Pittsburgh Penguins just endured against the Rangers. 2016, it was Pittsburgh that takes out the Capitals in the second round in Game 6. And then in 2017, they took them out in the second round in Game 7. So that's 3 straight years they lost in the second round. And the conversation in 2017 was, this team can't get out of round 2, had never got out of round 2 with Ovechkin, and yada, yada, yada. And then 2018, they finally get past round 2, and they won themselves the Stanley Cup. So they got over that hump, and they won the Cup. Since then, they've gone back to not being able to get over that hump. But it's a different one now. It's round 1. So 2019, they lost in 7 games in a very, very hotly contested series against Carolina. Then in 2020, they lost in 5 games in the first round against the New York Islanders. 2021, they lost in 5 games in the first round against Boston. And again, this year, they put up a fight against Florida, but they lose in 6 games against Florida. And so the question becomes, again, what do you do in the offseason? Do you potentially look to get younger, which might draw you back a little bit in the standings? Or do you go ahead, go out, use some of that cap space you've got to go out and find somebody and try to find a way to win another Stanley Cup? So what's the tactic going to be? What are they going to do? We will find out soon enough. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.